late Tuesday night. So most of us on the East Coast were asleep when this tweet went out. But holy crap. Sluka Doncic, say it ain't so. Matthew Sluka, the quarterback at UNLV, who has led the Rebels to a 3-0 start, including wins over Houston and Kansas. Those are Big 12 teams, by the way. Tweets, I have decided to utilize my redshirt year, and I will not be playing in any additional games this season. I committed to UNLV based on certain representations that were made to me, which were not upheld after I enrolled. Despite discussions, it became clear that these commitments would not be fulfilled in the future. I wish my teammates the best of luck this season and hope for the continued success of the program. Ari, holy crap.
I got to tell you, it feels great to have a daily college football show. I mean, like, we're not going to miss anything. We get to react to this right away. Andy, this is a shocking development and kind of a heartbreaking development because we're talking about a UNLV team that I believe was leading the way in my bubble watch, and I think your latest bracketology. We're looking at a team that's 3-0, ranked in the top 25 for the first time in program history, I think I read. They are an exciting team, and we got to watch Sluka Doncic play against Kansas a few weeks ago together when we were in Wisconsin, and it was a really fun ride. So we're still, I think, in the information gathering phase in terms of what actually occurred here. But I'm excited to get into it because I think we came up with 3 scenarios that this could be, and I want to talk through them with you because this could be, a good case study for future situations. I don't think it's just about Sluka here. I think it's about, NIL outperforming what you were probably expected to do and what comes next.
So Andrew in the chat says, I don't think this will be the last player that does this. I agree. And look, we have heard whispers, Ari. You and I talk to coaches and personnel people, and we've heard whispers that this might happen, that this almost happened at some point. Like there was a player, there might have been a player who went in and said, I may be shutting it down unless this happens, and then it happened and it wasn't shut down. But I think there's 3 potential buckets here. And I see in the chat people who've made their decision about Matthew Sluka one way or the other. They either think he's a villain or a hero here. And you don't know. Like, I'm just telling you right now, whatever you think, you don't know. Like, I don't know if he's the villain or the hero in this story because we don't know the facts. We know what he said. We know what UNLV's putting out on the other side because he said the commitments weren't met. You've got UNLV now back channeling saying they were, and the numbers kept changing. We don't know the truth yet. We may never know the truth. Like, we may need a lawsuit with document production required to get to the bottom of it. We may not get that. So if you think you know, to quote the MTV True Life theme, you have no idea. So we're not going to pretend we know the facts here. And we're not going to say that this is definitely what happened because we don't know that. But I'm going to throw 3 scenarios at you, Ari. This is what you and I talked about this before the show. There's 3 potential scenarios. This situation is going to happen again. And it's probably going to happen a lot unless the schools want to change the system that they created.
And before you throw the 3 scenarios out there, Andy, I just wanted to add that this is an important case study because as we go through these 3 scenarios, Sluka is the good guy in some of them, the bad guy in some of them, and maybe in the middle somewhere in some of them. And correct. It's not necessarily, I don't want people to just frame the conversation that we're about to have only about Sluka. I want you to envision other people who are inevitably going to be in similar situations in the future and kind of frame our minds and kind of use this as a thought exercise for just the general situation that people are going to find themselves in. So it's probably going to come to light, but I think it's important to just like frame it that way.
Well, and Austin in the chat says an NC State QB did this last year, I believe. No, that was not what happened with MJ Morris. So what happened with MJ Morris is MJ Morris was playing for NC State, thought he was going to be the QB1 going into 2023. They recruited Brennan Armstrong over him and said, tough luck. And then Brennan Armstrong wasn't playing well. And they're like, hey, MJ, we need you. And then MJ came in and won some games and is like, oh, now you need me. Nah, I'm going to shut it down and go somewhere else because you recruited over me. So it's a little bit different situation than this one. So the three potential scenarios here for Sluka or for anybody in this situation, because again, this isn't, we don't know what the story is with Sluka for real here. But scenario one would be what Sluka described in his tweet. The player and the school's collective agreed to X dollars over a certain time period. The collective actually paid Y dollars, and Y is a number significantly lower than X. That's a bait and switch. Nobody would blame the player in that situation if that's what really happened.
Yeah, and
you would do the same thing in your own life if you agreed to a job and you got your first paycheck and it's a a third of what they told you it was going to be, something like that. Like that's what you would do. Scenario number two. Oh, go ahead, Ari.
Oh no, I thought I was going to react to them one by one, but why don't you do all three and then we'll talk about it.
Okay. All right. Scenario number two. The player and the school's collective agreed to X dollars over a certain time period. The collective paid X dollars as agreed upon, but the player had some success on the field, and now he wants Z dollars. And of course, Z is a higher number than X. Now, scenario three, which brings another party into the equation, or potentially multiple other parties. The player and the school's collective agreed to X dollars over a certain time period. The collective paid X dollars as agreed upon, but the player had some success on the field, and suddenly representatives of other schools are reaching out to the player saying, hey, what do you make right now? Oh, you make X? Well, how would you like to make Q here next year, with Q being a significantly higher dollar figure than X?
It's real life stuff right there. Okay, so obviously scenario one is just a pretty simple, he got mistreated, he walked away, and that's what it is. But the thing that is interesting about this is that it's not just like us going to a job. It's a little bit more intense because from a public perception, he is being counted on pretty dramatically from a team that has been hoping to make the CFP in the first, rendition of the 12-team era. And if the employer doesn't pay the employee what they agreed to pay, some people might still feel like he has a certain responsibility to not let 84 other people down. So like that to me is what makes this complicated. It's not that it's a straight line. I would do the same thing, but we are still recovering from the NCAA brainwash of the game's more important, your teammates are more important, this isn't a business. So there are probably people who, in this very clear scenario where somebody was told something and wasn't given what they were told, still somewhat looks like the bad guy, because it cannot be easy, whether it's for selfish reasons or selfless reasons, to walk away from a team that's 3-0 in the group of five over two P4 teams and do this. So like, I can acknowledge that even if he was in a tough position and told something that wasn't made good on, that people are still going to think he's a scumbag and he probably doesn't want to walk away. So like that is a really complicated scenario there.
It is. And here's the thing with these three scenarios, ask yourself what you do in each of the three. I think most of us, if we were in scenario one, would stop working. Whether we have people relying on us or not, like, okay, here's a great example. You just came here to On3. You just got your first On3 paychecks. Like, imagine your first On3 paycheck was like one half of what they told you it was going to be. Like, I would expect you to not come to work the next day.
I think I'd probably just come because I love the game, but I'd probably still come to the but like, you're right. I would do exactly what Matthew Sluka did, and I think everybody would. But there is going to be a portion of people out there who expect him, regardless of whether or not he got the full NIL promise, to still show up, because there is a faction of people out there that still are not 100% up to accepting NIL, and also expecting that the love of the university and the school is more powerful than compensation financially.
Yeah.
which, those people would be wrong in this instance, but you're going to still have people calling him a scumbag, even if he is the good guy in the scenario.
And I saw some tweets about, well, I would have given anything to get a free education and somebody pay for my school. You would have, because you weren't any good at football. Like, if you were good at football, you would have understood you had options and leverage. And so
how many years do you think it's going to take for those tweets and those people to become extinct? Do you think we're going to hear that in 10 years, or do you think
it's a generation away? It's a generation. Now there's always going to be losers who weren't good at anything that are mad that they didn't get free college, but you can't really do much about them.
I had to pay for college.
I didn't. So, but it wasn't because I was good at sports.
You're just smart. You're just a smart guy.
Well, but no, but that's what I always tell people, like, be good at school, and there's money for that.
Yeah.
So, but this is scenario 2. Like I said, let's put ourselves in these scenarios. Scenario 2, I would keep playing. Like, if I agreed to a deal, this would be like we'll use your example again. If you just got to On3, they're paying you what you agreed upon, and you suddenly decide you want more because we've had some success. Like, I don't know if y'all have seen the podcast charts lately, but since Ari got here, we're kind of soaring. Like, we're beating up on people who, let's be real here, they're paying a lot more for their podcast than we are for ours, and we're kicking their asses. So, like, are you going to come in and say, oh, you didn't give me enough? Or are you going to say, we talked, we negotiated, we agreed upon this, it's a fair salary, and I'm going to keep working? I think both of us would keep working.
I know that analogy is true. And of course, I'm going to keep working. I've been here for 2 weeks. I'm not going to renegotiate what I agreed upon. But there is a big difference here, Andy, that you're not including in your scenario. You want to know what it is?
What's that?
It's that we don't know what Matthew Sluka's long-term earning potential is in the NFL, right? Like, we don't know.
I can tell you what Matthew Sluka's earning potential in the NFL as a quarterback from watching him start these last 3 weeks.
Okay.
It's $0. So,
okay. Perfect. Right. Yeah. I'm with you. So for me and you, we have a long time arc of podcasting, right? Like, we hope that the proof of concept, and we're in a stage right now as podcasters to want to build something with staying power that we can be proud of, right? And that's not just about compensation or doing it for On3 or our bosses. It's a pride thing. It's a love of the game, all the things that you would want to say. But we have the ability, if we make good on those promises and we do a good show and people listen to it and people like it, that down the line it can become something that it's not. Matthew Sluka has a very finite amount of time to make as much money as possible. So if you don't think he's going to make it in the NFL, and I think that what we saw is that he's a very fun college football player who could maybe be a very good, exciting player that leads a P4 team to a conference title game, you don't have a lot of time to capitalize on this income potential. So you also have to like take into account that it's not just, well, I'm going to make good on my promise. I'm at UNLV. We're 3-0. If he plays out the rest of the season as making X, and he could be making 10X somewhere else next year, but if he finishes the year, he doesn't get 10X, then that's a completely different discussion than what you and I would do if we had better numbers than we anticipated in year one of a multi-year deal that could be extended into a 10, 15-year, 20-year scenario if things go well. So like I think that we need to accept that like he's trying to make as much money as humanly possible in a short amount of time, because once this is over, the money well dries up.
Yeah. And that's, I think, like, if you consider that and you still say he should, and I'm not saying Sluka, because we don't know exactly what happened here. But if you still say the player should live up to what they agreed upon, I'm not going to argue with that, because they made the deal. Like, sometimes you make a deal and it doesn't, you don't make as much as you could.
This is the scenario, though, where Sluka is the quote unquote bad guy, or player X who we're using in the scenario is the bad guy, right? You agree upon a amount of money, you outperform what you agreed upon, you think you can make more money than you shut it down. Like, you are the bad guy, right? But I think it's a really important discussion to have, because there are going to be other players in Sluka's position in the future who have very limited pro income potential, but have a pretty high ceiling as a player. And they might want to set themselves up financially by making a few extra $100,000 somewhere else in the following 12 months at a new place, because they're not going to be able to make that much money playing football ever again. And like, as easy as it is to be like, you let your roster down or you let your team down or you're bailing on your brothers, those are all things that are semi-true. But like, do you actually think that somebody who wants to use their skill set to maximize their income potential is a bad person? Like, I think that we have to have that discussion. And another thing, and I'm going to throw something at you right now, but UNLV is a feel-good story right now. Like, the timing of this is really, really bad for Sluka, because people think that UNLV has a chance to make the CFP given their first 3 games of the year. I also read a story on NBC by former colleague Nicole Auerbach that, talked to Barry Odom about pitching the CFP and telling his team that it's a potential and using it as a motivational factor all offseason. And they are now through 2 of the biggest tests on their schedule that would have potentially been the test that see whether you can get there. So let me ask you this. Are we even talking about this right now? We probably are, but are people even perceiving it the same way, or are everybody else talking about it right now if they're 1-2?
No, if they're 1-2 and they've only beaten Utah Tech, nobody notices this. Nobody notices at all.
But the action's the same. That's the thing. The
Yeah.
action is the same. You are still leaving your brothers, but you are a worse person because your team is better because of you, because you're leaving. It kind of puts me in a pretzel a little bit. Like, I don't think he's like, I see in the bad guy scenario why people would get wound up about it. Your team is 3-0. We're all excited about UNLV. I cannot wait to watch them. They've got some big games coming up, right? They're playing Boise this year. That was going to be a lot of fun. It stinks. But let's analyze the action, the circumstance, and the person. And I don't know that you get the Joker when you're all said and done with this. I think you get a person who's trying to maximize their income in a very short window. Yeah.
And that's like, this is where you can have reasonable people disagreeing, I think, in this scenario, because there are going to be people. And again, I'm not going to argue with those people. I'm going to argue with the ones who, if it's really a bait and switch, who say you should stay anyway, you absolutely should not. But if both sides fulfilled their parts of the agreement and one side of it says I'm out, then I don't have a problem with you having a problem with that. Like, I don't have a problem with somebody having a problem with it. And I get what you're saying about it's a limited time frame. You're trying to maximize what you can. But I get I signed a deal. I need to live up to my end of the deal if the other side is also living up to its end of the deal. Like,
well, here's the other end of this too, Andy. In deal making all the time, you have a winner and a loser, right? Like, you have a person who on one side offers money for a service. And we could use the On3 example again. If our podcast becomes bigger than Pardon My Take one day, On3 made a great deal with us, right? Like, that's part of being the deal maker. You invest in something and you hope that your investment pays off. So here is the crappy part from a UNLV standpoint, is that if UNLV in this scenario did live up to their end of the bargain and they made
a good deal. Yeah.
They made a good deal. But now, because they made such a good deal, the person who felt like they made a bad deal is putting the place that made a good deal in a worse position than they would have been had they never made the deal in the first place, which is a really, really tough scenario, because maybe they could have got somebody else that would have played out the season. They could have still maybe been 3-0, and that person would not have left the team. So also, too, the financial situation that we're at play here is that if this player was given a bulk sum of money or is being paid on a monthly basis, then in doing what they're doing should either forfeit their remaining income or should return some of the money that they had as a result of not living up to the deal, because the deal wasn't about taking UNLV to 3-0. The deal was playing the entire season and taking UNLV to its height. So like that, this is a financial agreement that also has to keep both sides of the party liable to a certain extent. So like, it's kind of complicated, but UNLV is in a worse position.
And the third scenario makes it more complicated because the system incentivizes scenario number 3.
Yep.
Where you watched him beat Houston and Kansas, and perhaps you are maybe even a Big 12 team, and you'd like to beat Houston and Kansas next year. Like, you can reach out to him and say, hey, we can pay more. And there's really no penalty for that. Like, if you have somebody reach out to his agent and you don't do it directly, they're not going to catch you for tampering. And you can make whatever promises you want. You don't actually have to keep them. But if you say, I'm going to pay you 5 times what you're making now or 10 times what you're making now, well, they got to listen to it. And if they get more than one saying it, they're probably going to do it and try to make that deal. So all of this is a long way of saying, Ari, the schools need to fix this themselves. Like, this is their fault because they're the ones who insist on the players not being employees. They're the ones who insist on this money's not for pay for play. It's not for, their abilities as football players. Well, yes, it is. So just admit it, sign them to contracts and move on. Like, stop fighting this. Like, I know for a fact somebody sent me pictures of a bunch of ADs in the DC airport yesterday because they were there begging Congress for an antitrust exemption. You're not going to get it. So figure out a system where you can sign these guys. Like, UNLV could have signed Matthew Sluka to a 1-year contract because he had 1 year of eligibility left that would pay him X amount of dollars. You could have backloaded it saying, if you start X number of games, you get this bonus. Incentivize staying.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, you can't do that. Instead, you have these deals, which neither side really has to live up to. I'm not taking the collectives off the hook either here. And it creates this. So if you'd like to have rules, if you'd like to have stability, the answer is there for you. And don't tell me it's too complicated because every business in America does it. Everybody else has figured it out. I'm imagining that people at some of the greatest institutions of higher learning in the country can also figure it out.
So in scenario 3, if this is the scenario and he was offered money at a higher rate to go somewhere, is he the bad guy for being swayed to do that by leaving his team to do that?
Again, I can accept the argument. Like, I can accept the argument that if the collective paid what they said they're going to pay and you agreed to the deal, then you are the bad guy for leaving. Now, I understand that there may be a lot more money if you go to some other school now and play next year. But I'm not going to have a problem with people being mad over that. Like, I don't know if I would do that. If I was getting bait and switched, I would absolutely do that. I would absolutely leave. I would go somewhere else. But if they did what they said they were going to do, I don't think I could do it.
So this is a trust tree show, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Everybody here is our friend. Like, it's just me and you, but everybody here listening is our friend. We're in the tree of trust. Okay. What's the difference between this and what I just did?
You served out your contract.
That's true, but I knew while serving out that contract that I was not going to be there for a remaining contract. So I guess that's different. But
you gave them a chance. Like, they had a chance. So, like, when we left the same company and came here. They offered me an extension. This extension was a lot better. Like, that's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's true because in this scenario, redshirting doesn't finish out the deal.
Right. And the time element complicates this a lot.
Because he's capped. Yeah.
But at a certain point, like, if you move on to a system where you have employment contracts, like if you make the deal, serve the deal. Like that's how it works. Now we see in the NFL, we'll see the holdouts, hold-ins, stuff like that, because that's the only way with the CBA that they can leverage this. And maybe that's what happens in college sports too. But ultimately, they end up playing in the NFL because you start missing game checks, and that's rough.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing too, Andy, because we always talk about like players and, I was always just kind of dumbfounded by the notion that players had to be fired up or motivated or watch a motivational video before a game, because that game tape is literally all there is to every job interview that'll ever matter for them in the sport. And now you want to talk about game tape and the importance of game tape. If this is going to happen, because this is going to happen for players who aren't at the end of their eligibility and will be able to leave and serve out their contract the way that I did and then move on. So it's a lot different doing it during the portal era or when the renewal window is, right, than it is doing it in the middle of the season, especially when your team is up to 3-0 and has 2 wins over P4 opponents. But your game tape and your ability to get out there is not just tape for NFL scouts and GMs to peruse through. It's tape for other collectives to peruse through. The better you play, the more you show. I mean, like, hell, Andy, if this is happening in this scenario to Sluka, did he even complete a forward pass in the second half of the Kansas win? Like, he was fun to watch, and it was like running around and stuff. Yeah. He did like,
I know it.
Yeah.
I agree.
So like, I think that like your income potential as a college football player can go up dramatically after 3 games of tape. I mean, if this is what happened, think about that. It's not like he's played all year and they're like, this guy's, I mean, it's 3 games.
Yeah, I know. And it's crazy. And it may not, like, if he winds up in another school, this may not work out for that other school.
Yeah. And also too, how do you know for sure that other school is ready to honor that commitment when we're in September? You know what I mean? Like I'm assuming that if those conversations have happened, that they're hypothetical. Here's the earning potential. Come here. Like, I don't know, handshake and a wink, I guess. But like,
yeah,
we're not in the right part of the calendar for you to do anything binding anyway.
Yeah, no, you're right. Well, but Ari, we'll have to see.
One thing I want to say, sorry, Andy,
go ahead.
One last thing. And this is about Matthew Sluka. But if it isn't scenario A, and it's either scenario B or C, which is him making a business decision, the gumption that you would have to have as a human being to post on your social media that you were not given what you were told is pretty crazy. So, like, to me, it's kind of hard not to believe to a certain extent that he feels this way, whether it's exactly the way it went. This message here to me makes it feel like it's a little bit more complicated than what we think. Because you don't post that if you're just, I'm worth more, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
Do you?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's what, we like JD in the chat says, UNLV attacked this story well, gave all the info to reporters. Soon it will come out from the Sluka camp that he was not paid the NIL money he was guaranteed when he transferred to UNLV. No, that's what came out first. That's what came out from the Sluka camp last night. He beat them to the punch on this. He set the narrative, and now UNLV's scrambling. But I'm not making any judgments yet because I don't know what the truth is. I'm not going to pretend I do.
That was a fun discussion, and we're going to have them more and more as we continue on in the new world. Yeah.
By the way, get ready for the Hajj-Malik Williams era. Hajj-Malik Williams transferred from the Fighting Campbell Camels. That's your new UNLV QB1. Now, he spent spring and summer with the ones because Sluka didn't come until fall camp. So, Hajj-Malik Williams, been with the guys. We'll see if he can keep it rolling. They play Fresno State on Saturday.
What would it happen if Hajj-Malik Williams has a really good game and he's like, you know what, guys,
then Matthew Sluka may have played himself.
Yeah, also very, very interesting thought process there too of leave early, backup plays really well. All of a sudden, if suddenly Ricky White, their star receiver, is getting more balls thrown his way and their offense is more explosive. Well, one, they picked the wrong quarterback out of camp, and two,
how does that help Sluka going forward? Because that could be a tricky negotiation. Like, wait, wasn't this dude better than you? So again, all of it's very complicated. We'll find out maybe what actually happened, but maybe not. Ari, this is a great transition into The Money Game. The Money Game is a 6-part docuseries on Prime Video following LSU athletes last year. So Jayden Daniels, Livvy Dunne, Angel Reese, learn all about the world of NIL and how these superstar athletes were trying to navigate it. It's a little bit different tax bracket than Matthew Sluka with these three, but it is absolutely fascinating. Behind the scenes access. It's on Prime Video. If you'd like to watch The Money Game, click the link in the show description of the YouTube video you're watching or the podcast you're listening to. If you're a Prime subscriber, it'll take you right to the show. If you are not a Prime Video subscriber, what are you waiting for? You get Thursday Night NFL, The Rings of Power, The Lord of the Rings show. Yeah, there's a new episode coming out this Thursday. You get caught up. You can watch all of season 1, binge it, get caught up on season 2. But given that discussion we just had, I know you're going to love The Money Game. So watch that on Prime Video.